My mic is muted. Okay, there we go. There we go. My mic is on. And it looks like I'm live. This is my first time going live on YouTube. I think I'm simultaneously broadcasting on Facebook as well. This is my first time doing this, so we'll see how this goes. Most of the time, I record my broadcasts and I upload them, but this is the first time that I'm live, so we'll see. But I don't want this video to be too long. As a matter of fact, this is going to be my first of 2 live broadcasts today. And I didn't want this video to extend beyond 15 minutes because honestly, it's unfortunate that I'm even having to make this video. It really is unfortunate that I'm having to make this video. What's up, Chris Gibson? I see you out there, Dot. Hey, man, share the broadcast if you can, man. Like I said, this is my first time going live on YouTube, so I don't know who's out there in YouTube. I'm also live on Facebook. I don't know who's watching on Facebook, but we're gonna make this happen nonetheless. So listen, if you've been following the whole saga around the assault and the attack upon the Black church, then you know that this conversation has been raging for quite some time. I honestly didn't want to continue addressing those that are unfairly critiquing and disparaging the Black church. I did it. I made 2 videos where I addressed April Chapman. I was also in a podcast with Damon Richardson, Dr. Eric Mason, Dr. Jerome Gay, where we talked about it. And I really, you know, after my last post that I made, which was a kind of a brief response to a broadcast that was made by April Chapman and a couple other people. After that, I wanted to be done with it. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want my channel to become a response channel. I don't want my channel to become a channel where I'm going after people, right? There's far more things that I can do. There are far more topics that I can discuss than, you know, what he said, what she said, what he's doing, what she's doing. And so I don't want my channel to devolve into that. And so I really didn't want to get back on this subject. Didn't want to address it again until I was sent a link. I forgot who sent me the link, but I was sent a link, and it was a link to a broadcast made by a gentleman that I had heard of before. I'd heard of this dude before, but I never really followed his stuff. Never really listened to him carefully. The reason why I heard of him is because I had sort of been listening in on what April Chapman was saying about the Black church. And this was weeks, months before the whole Allie Beth Stuckey thing. So this narrative that at least I'm responding to what Allie Beth said is a false narrative. I had been on their radar, and by there, I'm talking about Corey Minor, April Chapman, and the rest. I've been on their radar, you know, for a long time because of the greasy way they were talking about the Black church. And so sometimes I would tune in to April Chapman to hear what she had to say about the Black church. And I noticed that she was friends with this person named Vince Ellison. I really didn't know anything about him, didn't really care to know anything about him, whatever. And so I was sent this link to a broadcast that he made in response to, I guess, the podcast or the broadcast that me, Damon, Dr. Mason, and Jerome Gay did. And the reason why he didn't mention us in his particular broadcast, but the reason why I know that this was a response to us is because he used my picture, Damon's picture, and Mace's picture on the thumbnail. And so clearly, obviously, he was responding to us without saying our names. And so I was sent the link to watch this, and I even hesitated to watch it. But I watched it, and let me tell y'all, this is the way that I felt the entire time I watched this guy's broadcast. This is the way I felt, y'all. Ready?
Black of skin and full of sin, come forward, so I may lay my hands on you.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Black, be gone. Ah, praise white Jesus.
That's how I felt. I felt that I was one of those people. I felt that this Ellison guy was ruckus, and I was one of those reluctant people at the altar call getting the blackness slapped off of me in worship and veneration of white Jesus. I'm telling y'all, the entire time that I watched it, all I could think about was
Black
this.
of skin and full of sin, come forward, so I may lay my hands on you.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Black, be gone. Ah, praise white Jesus.
So I watched it nonetheless. I watched the entire broadcast. And you know, I know that my outreach to April Chapman fell on deaf ears. And I realize that this is going to fall on deaf ears as well. As far as this guy, Vince Ellison or Vince Ellis, I hope I'm saying his name right. As far as he's concerned, I don't expect him to listen to me. I don't expect those of his ilk to listen to me. But I wanted to make a brief response because I think that this is still a great teachable moment for those that are objective enough and unbought enough to think for themselves. Like I said, this Ellison guy, he may not even hear this, and if he does, he's gonna be obstinate. He's gonna stay where he is. But if you're listening to me right now and you're objective and you want to learn, you want to actually have a deeper understanding about these things and just a surface level understanding, I think this conversation is going to be beneficial to you. I think this conversation is going to be helpful to you. And I see y'all coming in. Great. I see my sister Michelle Turner. Great. I see JM here. Great. My wife is actually on as well. Go ahead, wifey, on as well, along with Chris Gibson. So please, this is my first time going live on YouTube, my first time going live on that platform. So please share, get everybody else in, and let's get the crew in. But you know, as I listened to this Ellison guy, I kept asking myself a question. The question was like, why is anybody taking this guy seriously? Why do people really give this guy any credibility? Because it's clear that he has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to the black church. Again, I don't follow this guy, so I don't know if he's an expert in other areas. I don't know if he has expertise in areas that I'm unaware of. He may. But when he opened up his mouth and started talking about the black church, particularly the history of the black church, and using the history of the black church as a way to talk about why the black church is the way it is today, I sat and I thought to myself, the only people that think that he's enlightened and that think that he actually knows what he's talking about are people that are in his echo chamber. Because if you hear him talk and you're outside of his echo chamber, or let me be charitable. If you are a part of his echo chamber, but you're at least knowledgeable about some of these things, then you would listen to him and you would say, this guy is clueless. You still might like him. You still might be a fan of him, but there is no way that you can listen to him out as someone outside of his echo chamber and as someone that is at least, you know, you possess at least a modicum of knowledge around these issues. When you listen to this guy, there's no way that you can walk away and say that was an informed take. Let me give you an example. And And this is the clip that I pulled. Again, I think his broadcast was about 20, 30 minutes long, something like that. And this is the clip that I pulled. And I want you guys to hear this clip. Again, be objective. Those of you that aren't a part of the echo chamber, you're already objective. But those of you that like this guy, let's have a moment of objectivity. Okay? Check this out. This is what he said.
Look, since the black preacher started, the slave master in the South created that position. The Democratic Party slave master created the position of the black preacher to aid and abet him. It was never for the congregation. It was always to aid and abet the white Democrat. The black preacher was the job of the black preacher, the occupation of the black preacher, the office of the black preacher was designed by the white master, the white Democrat slave master, to aid and abet him in controlling the black community. And it's worked like a charm.
Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? Let me play it one more time. It's only 45 seconds long. Let me play it one more time. I want you to listen carefully to what he's saying. Let me play it one more time. One more time.
Look, since the black preacher started, the slave master in the South created that position. The Democratic Party slave master created the position of the black preacher to aid and abet him. It was never for the congregation. It was always to aid and abet the white Democrat. The black preacher was the job of the black preacher, the occupation of the black preacher, the office of the black preacher was designed by the white master, the white Democrat slave master, to aid and abet him in controlling the black community. And it's worked like a charm.
So let's talk for just a second. And again, this is a moment of objectivity, please. If you're a Vince Ellison troll, just listen to me. The claim is the black preacher was an invention of the white Democrat slave master. And the white Democrat slave master used the black preacher to control and subjugate enslaved black people. By the way, if you hear sirens out there, I am in South LA. All right. It's an everyday thing here in South LA. So that's the claim. If you know even a shred of history, you already know the problem with this claim. Because the Democratic Party as an organization began around, I think, 1830, 1829. But I want to show you a picture of somebody. You know who that is? That's Richard Allen. You know what Richard Allen was? Richard Allen was a black preacher. Richard Allen's church, Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. Do you want to know when it was dedicated? It was dedicated in 1797. So if the black preacher is an invention of the Democratic Party, how do you explain the Reverend Richard Allen, who was a black preacher, whose church was dedicated and officially launched in the late 18th century? All you got to do is just know a shred of stuff. So listen. Automatically, as we're having this conversation, his credibility around these issues should evaporate. Automatically. Those listening to this should say, okay, I know I can't trust Ellison on this issue when it comes to the black church. Now, let me try to give Ellison the benefit of the doubt. Let me try, if I can. Let me try to give him the benefit of the doubt. Sure, there were enslaved preachers used by slave masters to subjugate and control their slaves. This was before the Democratic Party. This wasn't something that came about as a result of the existence of the Democratic Party. So let me give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he spoke anachronistically on accident. And maybe what he was trying to say is the black preacher was an invention of slave masters, even before the Democratic Party existed, to control and subjugate their slaves. And to that claim, I would have to say that there is evidence that some black preachers were used by white slave masters to control the enslaved population. So let me give him the benefit of the doubt. But his conclusion is that these black preachers, enslaved black preachers, were successful in controlling the enslaved population, and that they were the ones that kept the enslaved population in check. The enslaved population gave these enslaved preachers their loyalty and their ear. And what we see today in the black church is really just a reflection of these enslaved black preachers being used as tools by the slave masters to control the enslaved black population back when, slavery was an institution. That's his conclusion. But that conclusion is extremely faulty. That conclusion is extremely false. How do I know that conclusion is extremely faulty and false? And how do I know that Vince Ellison hasn't done even a single bit of study on the history of the black church? Well, how do I know that? Because all you got to do is pick up a book. If you really care to understand these things, there are accounts. We have primary accounts of this institution and how enslaved people regarded these black preachers that were used as tools and pawns by slave masters. As a matter of fact, you don't mind if we have story time, do you? I just want to read a little bit to you. I wish that Vince Ellison would read. I wish that those of his ilk would read. I wish that his echo chamber would read about the black church and the history of the black church, because then they wouldn't make statements like this, and they wouldn't present themselves as experts in this area, and they wouldn't make faulty conclusions. All they would have to do is pick up a book. Let me read this real quick. Let's just have a brief story time, okay? Brief story time. All right. So this is in Albert Rabbito's groundbreaking, essential book, Slave Religion. If you care to study black church history, this is where you have to start. And there's actually a primary source quoted on page 214 of the book. Actually, let me start on page 213. This is what it says. It says, another former slave, Charlie Van Dyke, bitterly complained church was what they called it, but all that preacher talked about was for us slaves to obey our masters and not to lie and steal. Nothing about Jesus. So already you hear an enslaved person hearing the rhetoric coming from slave preachers and recognizing, wait a minute, there's a disconnect between the truth and what they're saying. Let's continue. The overseer stood there to see the preacher talk, and he wanted him to talk. Consequently, even a black preacher would get up and repeat everything that the white preacher had to say because he was afraid to say anything different. For more authentic Christian preaching, listen, for more authentic Christian preaching, the slaves had to turn elsewhere. Lucretia Alexander explained what slaves did when they grew tired of the white folks' preachers. The preacher came. He'd just say, serve your masters. Don't steal your master's turkey. Don't steal your master's chickens. Don't steal your master's hogs. Don't steal your master's meat. Do whatsoever your master tells you to do. Same old thing all the time. My father would have church in dwelling houses, and they had to whisper. Sometimes they would have church at his house. That would be when they would want a real meeting with some real preaching. They used to sing their songs in a whisper and pray in a whisper. That was a prayer meeting from house to house once or twice a week. So what does this primary source tell us? Enslaved people, by and large, rejected these black slave preachers that were pawns of white slave masters. By and large, they rejected them, but they didn't reject church, and they didn't reject preaching altogether, and they didn't reject black preachers altogether. What did they ultimately do? They would have their own church with their own black preachers that didn't preach the rhetoric preached by the bought and co-opted black preachers. So what have we learned just by this primary source here? That Ellison'S narrative of the black preacher, first of all, being a tool of the Democratic Party, being this pawn of the white slave master, that was successful in essentially seducing all the black slaves into accepting the agenda of the slave master and the agenda of slavery, right? This narrative that the black preacher is nothing but a pawn of the white slave master who has seduced and lulled the black population to sleep. False. False. Black people were strong enough and perceptive enough to hear that kind of preaching, reject that kind of preaching, establish their own churches where true and biblical preaching was being had. And guess who led those services? Black preachers that were unbought. And to be honest, who would be those black preachers that would have been used by white slave masters? Who would have been those black preachers used by those white slave masters? Not the ones like Richard Allen, not the ones like Henry Highland Garnett, but the ones that looked more like this.
Black of skin and full of sin, come forward, so I may lay my hands on you.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Black, be gone. Ah, praise white Jesus.
So you have to ask what lineage and what line is Ellison in? What lineage and line am I in? Dr. Mason in? Are they in the lineage and line of black preachers that would have been tools of the white slave masters? Or are they in the lineage and line of the preachers that would have been embraced by the enslaved people as teaching biblical truth and advocating for their liberation? Let me read more here. Let me read more. We're just having a little bit of a story time. I hope y'all don't mind. A little bit of a story time. Now, here's an account of an actual enslaved preacher, that was a tool of the white slave master. But this is an interesting account because in Ellison's mind, all those bought and controlled black preachers that were serving at the behest of the white slave masters, they were like robots. And all they did was just do what the slave master wanted them to do to seduce black people. But here's an account that again unravels Ellison's faulty narrative of an actual enslaved black preacher that was guilty of preaching quote unquote slave master Christianity. Let me read it. Let's see, where do I want to start? This is on page 232 of this book. It says, licensed with or without permission, preachers held prayer meetings, preached and ministered in a very difficult situation. Carefully watched and viewed with suspicion, the preacher had to straddle the conflict between the demands of conscience and the orders of the masters. As one former slave put it, back there, they were harder on preachers than they were on anybody else. They thought preachers were ruining the colored people. Anderson Edwards reflects on the difficulty he experienced as a slave preacher in Texas. Again, here's another primary account. This is what he said. I've been preaching the gospel and farming since slavery time. When I starts preaching, I couldn't read or write and had to preach what Massa told me. And he said, tell them, and he used the N word. I don't want to use it because it's, it's on YouTube. But tell them blank, if and they obeys the master, they goes to heaven. Now listen to this. But I know there's something better for them. But daren't tell them stepped on the sly. That I done lots. I tell them if and they keeps praying, the Lord will set them free. So do you see this narrative? Even a slave preacher that was preaching the type of quote unquote gospel the slave master wanted them to preach. Told the enslaved people on the sly, yeah, all that's mess. All that's mess. God is really about your liberation. God is really about your freedom. God is really about justice. On the sly, even enslaved preachers bought by slave masters, towing their line, would operate in a subversive way. This is the last thing that I want to read from slave religion. Now, again, if you're listening to me objectively, then you've already concluded that Vince Ellison is not a credible source when it comes to the black church. If you're part of the echo chamber, then I expect you to think that Vince Ellison is enlightened regardless of what he says. But if you're objective, then you're comparing the claims of Vince Ellison to actual history, actual fact. And you're comparing his conclusions to actual history, actual fact. Maybe you're just joining me, and maybe you don't know the claim that Ellison made. Let me share the claim with you again. Here's the claim of Ellison in his podcast. Let me go back to it. Where is it? Here's the claim of Ellison. All right.
Look, since the black preacher started, the slave master in the South created that position. The Democratic Party slave master created the position of the black preacher to aid and abet him. It was never for the congregation. It was always to aid and abet the white Democrat. The black preacher was the job of the black preacher, the occupation of the black preacher, the office of the black preacher was designed by the white master, the white Democrat slave master, to aid and abet him in controlling the black community. And it's worked like a charm.
So you see why I say that listening to him is like this.
Black of skin and full of sin, come forward, so I may lay my hands on you.
Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Black, be gone. Praise white Jesus.
So let me read something else to you from this. Another primary source which debunks Vince Ellison and his claim about black preachers and how they began and even how they were regarded by enslaved black people. All right. This is on page 237. Same book, 237. It says, a highly visible figure in the community, the preacher occupied a position of esteem and authority and undoubtedly developed a reputation which could form the basis for folktales. The prestige of the role attracted some characters to the ministry who furnished the prototypes of the rascal Jack Lake preacher, perhaps the genre of black preacher tales begun during slavery. For some, the call to preach might have been a call to status and privilege. But for the majority, it was the command of God to spread the gospel. One former slave explained his calling in simple and eloquent words. Here's another primary source, not Vince Ellison. One former slave explained his calling in simple and eloquent words, which epitomized the ideal of the preacher's vocation. Usually, swallow something. You see, I'm a preacher. The Lord called me once I was working. He called me and told me in imagination, that he wanted me to preach. I told him I didn't know enough, that I was ignorant, and the folks would laugh at me. But he drew me on, and I prayed. I prayed out in the woods, and every time I tried to get up from my knees, he would draw me down again. At last, a great light came down sudden to me, a light as big as the moon, and struck me hard on the head and on each shoulder and on the breast, here and here and here. And then the same warmth was round me, my heart, and I felt that the book was in there. And my tongue was untied. And I preach ever since and is not afraid. I can't read the book, but I has it here. I has the text and the meaning. And I speaks as well as I can. And the congregation takes what the Lord gives me. I lied. I just want to read one more thing. Out of the book. This is on page 239. It says, the sermons of the slave preacher were based upon the Bible. Indeed, the biblical orientation of slave religion was one of its central characteristics. Stories, characters, and images from both Old and New Testaments pervaded the preaching, praying, and singing of the slaves. Now you can know actual history and base your conclusions upon the present based on actual history, or you can just believe Vince Ellison, who clearly does not know history. And here's the retort. Here's the retort. Why do we need to know history? Why do we need to know? And hold on, I'm going to address Sankara because Sankara doesn't know history either. Because to know, this is what Sankara is saying. I'm not gonna let him get me off track, and don't in the comic session, don't let him get y'all off track either, because he doesn't know history either. Because if he did know history, he would know about Denmark Vesey, and he would know about Richard Allen's role in that rebellion that was to happen, and he would know about Prialu, who's the one that ultimately sabotaged that. But ultimately, it was black church leaders that was aiding and abetting Denmark Vesey in that potential uprising. But because he doesn't know actual history, he's parroting things that he's heard in his bankrupt Hotep echo chambers. I digress. You can believe Ellison or Sankara, who don't know history, who are clueless, or you can study actual history. You can learn actual history and base your conclusions upon that. And here's the pushback that I often get. We don't need to know history. We can just see what's going on. We can see what's observable. See, but that's not what you're doing. That's not what Vince Ellison is doing. Vince Ellison is not just observing. What he's doing is what he did in this clip is he's using his misconception about history to draw a conclusion about what's happening today. So do you see the disconnect? His faulty understanding of history is leading him to an incorrect conclusion about what's going on today. And here's what this guy's saying, and I don't know how to time him out. I don't listen. I'm all new to this stuff, so I don't know how to time this guy out. Listening to this guy will make you dumber. The reverends have always been up under massa, bin, up under massa, running interference, rebellions. Other than Nat was a reverend. So here's the cognitive dissonance. Nat was a reverend. Nat was a Christian. Nat would have looked at Sankara and told him that he needs Jesus. But because Sankara is ignorant about actual history, he'd rather parrot false Hotep claims. So listen, I don't know how to time this dude out because I don't want people to get dumb. If this guy wants to be dumb, he can be dumb, but we're not going to be dumb. All right. Let me get back to the subject at hand. I continued listening to Ellis. And again, I didn't want to make this response so long, but here we are now. I think we're beyond 30 minutes, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm hoping you guys are learning. I continued to listen to him, and I asked myself, what's really informing what he believes about black preachers in the black church? Because it's not history. Let me remove this comment. It's not history. It's not an accurate understanding of how things actually occurred. So I asked myself, what's really informing his opinions? Because it's not history. And as I heard him talk, two things stuck out to me. So let me play this 45-second clip again. I want to see if you hear it.
Look, since the black preacher started, the slave master in the South created that position. The Democratic Party slave master created the position of the black preacher to aid and abet him. It was never for the congregation. It was always to aid and abet the white Democrat. The black preacher was the job of the black preacher, the occupation of the black preacher, the office of the black preacher was designed by the white master, the white Democrat slave master, to aid and abet him in controlling the black community. And it's worked like a charm.
So do you hear it? Man, this guy hates the Democratic Party. He hates the Democrats. Now, I'm no fan of the Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. Definitely not a Trump supporter. Definitely not on the Trump train. Never will be on the Trump train. But I'm not a Democrat, not a Republican. I believe, like Dr. King, you have to be able to speak truth to both the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's hard to do that if you're in bed with either party. But man, this guy, it's clear he hates the Democrats. And what do we know about the black church? We know that members of the black church predominantly, what do? They vote Democrat. What do? We vote Democrat. And I say we because I'm a part of the black church. So you can understand why he doesn't like the black church, because the black church doesn't vote the way he wants us to vote. And he hates the Democratic Party. Now, I don't have time to go into, because, in his broadcast, he thinks that black people vote Democrat because they're ignorant, Black people vote Democrat because they're too stupid to think for themselves, and the black people vote Democrat because they're unable to think logically and critically and all that stuff, right? So, you know, black people bashing galore in his broadcast. But more charitable people that would ask the question, why do black people overwhelmingly vote Democrat? Which is a fair question, right? Need to study the difference between Lincoln and the radical Republicans during Lincoln, and what happened after Harry Truman took office, leading up to Lyndon Johnson. So you have to understand Lincoln and Lyndon to understand why black people primarily shifted away from the Republican Party toward the Democratic Party. And I don't have time to go into it, but there's actually a white guy by the name of Phil Vischer. So for those of you guys that think that we hate white people and we hate, the opinions of white people, let me recommend to you a white man by the name of Phil Vischer. If that name sounds familiar, Phil Vischer, the creator of VeggieTales, that's right, Bob the Tomato Guy. But he has on YouTube, and he did a wonderful job talking about and chronicling why white evangelicals vote overwhelmingly Republican and why black Christians vote overwhelmingly Democrat. And his analysis is very fair, very balanced. Because I don't have time to get into the nuances today, I would invite you guys to look that up. It's on YouTube. Phil Vischer, why do black people vote Democrat? It's clear. Ellison hates the Democratic Party, and his hatred for the Democratic Party motivates his hatred for black preachers and the black church. So there's a bias there that's motivating that. Now, the response to recognizing the flaws and the issues within the Democratic Party is not to become a tool and a token of the Republican Party. It's funny because I hear all these, quote unquote, black conservatives railing on the Democratic Party, but while they are simultaneously sucking at the teat of the Republican Party, and they're not speaking prophetically to the Republican Party, which is if you think that the Republican Party today is strong and they're not experiencing a huge moral and spiritual deficit, then you're just as backwards and blind as you think the Democrats are. But it's clear that his hatred for the Democrats and the Democratic Party is fueling his hatred for the black church and black preachers. So he can't be objective. There's also something else that I heard him say that helped me to understand, okay, this is his real motivation for hating black preachers in the black church. Because it's not based on study. It's not based on history. It's not based on an accurate assessment of the legacy history of the black church. Something else jumped out at me that he said in his broadcast. And here it is.
Like my daddy told me 20-some years ago, Vince, you trust a bootlegger before you trust a black preacher.
Let me play that one more time. Hear him. Listen.
Like my daddy told me 20-some years ago, Vince, you trust a bootlegger before you trust a black preacher.
His daddy told him. His daddy. So you couple those two things. My daddy said. And because they're Democrats, that is now going to be my fuel to caricature them, to misrepresent them, to attack them, to assault them, regardless of the history, regardless of what's actually true, because my daddy said. And because of the Democrats, I can now present this entire institution, as being woefully spiritually bankrupt and backwards because my daddy said, because the Democrats said. I want to encourage everybody listening to me today. Love your daddy. Honor your daddy. The Bible says that you're to honor your father and mother. But question, it's okay to question your daddy. It's okay to say, why, daddy? Why should you not trust the black preacher? Why should you trust the bootlegger more than you should trust the black preacher? Why? Now, to be sure, there are some black preachers that don't deserve to be trusted. To be sure, right? To be sure. I got it. But that's not all of them. You take Ellison's daddy's word for it, then you can't trust Henry Highland Garnett. You can't trust Dr. King, which Ellison has a huge problem with Dr. King. Huge problem with Dr. King. Hates Dr. King, which I'm not surprised by. But you can't trust the stalwart and strong and committed black preachers that are, in my opinion, representative of the black church tradition. Love your daddy, but don't let your daddy shape what you believe about an entire institution without doing due diligence and researching if what your daddy is saying is true. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is just my opinion. This is my personal assessment. My opinion, my personal assessment. As I listen to Ellison talk, I just thought to myself, and again, this is just me, y'all. I just thought to myself, man, this guy is really an unimpressive guy. Like when I look at some of the other black conservatives out there, black conservative commentators like Virgil Walker, Daryl Bernard Harrison, even April Chapman. Like when I listen to them, I may not agree with them. I may think that a lot of their takes are crazy, but they're articulate, they're entertaining. I can sit back and I can say, I see, outside of the fact that they're caping for white folks, I see why people would listen to them, because they're at least they're articulate, and they sound compelling. And but as I listen to listen to them for yourself and tell me if I'm wrong. I listen and I'm like, man, this guy's really unimpressive. He was stumbling and bumbling through a lot of his sentences. The connections he attempted to make were like non sequiturs. It was really bad. I'm just really unimpressive. And so I thought to myself, like, okay, this guy has an audience, has a following. People are listening to him. Why? Now I get it. He may be an expert in some areas, because I don't listen to his content. I'm not going to listen to his content after this. So he may be an expert in some areas, definitely not on the black church, history of the black church. But like, why does he have such a great following, and why do people believe him and give him the benefit of the doubt? And you know who answered that question for me? Nick Fuentes. Do you know who Nick Fuentes is? Nick Fuentes is an avowed white supremacist. He is a conservative. He's an avowed white supremacist. Vile guy. And he was engaged in a back and forth with Whitlock. What's the guy? Whitlock. I forget the guy's name, but Whitlock, the guy that used to be on ESPN, and now he has a podcast. He's a black guy, Jason Whitlock, I think his name is. So they were engaged in like a back and forth where they were like going at one another. They were going at each other, right? And Nick Fuentes said something about Jason Whitlock and about his platform that I think applies to Ellison and some of these other quote unquote black conservative commentators. Nick Fuentes is a vile white supremacist, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. So listen, I want you to hear what Nick Fuentes has to say about Jason Whitlock and tell me if this doesn't apply to Ellison and others. Look at what he says.
And you're a token. You are in conservative media as a black guy that can confer upon white people the dignity of not being called a racist for having their views. That's why you get paid. You did not compete to get that. You got it because people feel sorry. People don't want to be called racist. They feel sorry. They need a black person to give them credibility.
One more again.
And you're a token. You are in conservative media as a black guy that can confer upon white people the dignity of not being called a racist for having their views. That's why you get paid. You did not compete to get that. You got it because people feel sorry. People don't want to be called racist. They feel sorry. They need a black person to give them credibility.
So Vince Ellison probably ain't going to listen to me. Those of his ilk probably ain't going to listen to me. But maybe they'll listen to a white guy, Nick Fuentes. All right, listen, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do with the remaining time that I have. Questions, any questions? And I see some questions already there. If you have a question, I'd be happy to take your question. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Let's see. Here's something that was said earlier that I did want to address. Xerxes Reamer says, Isaiah, the black strong preachers of yesterday are not the same preachers we see today. Too many are not in the lineage of Vernon Johns, Dr. Kilgore, Second Baptist, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ward, St. Paul. I don't have any argument with what you're saying, Doc. If you follow my ministry, you know that I critique the black church and I critique black preachers and black preaching. This hasn't been a broadcast meant to suggest that there aren't jacklegs and there aren't charlatans in the black church. That's a deflection away from what we're actually talking about. What we're actually doing is addressing Ellison and his erroneous, ridiculous commentary on black preachers in the black church. Two things can be true at the same time. Vince Ellison can be wrong about his history and wrong about the conclusions that he's reaching. And there's a crisis within the black church when it comes to theological fidelity, biblical accuracy that we need to address. Now, do I think that this crisis is plaguing the entire institution? No. Do I think that this crisis is plaguing the majority of the institution? No. But do I think this crisis is plaguing a lot of the institution? Yes. And a lot is a lot. A lot is a lot. And we need to do something about it. All right. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Okay. He says, I get understanding black church history, but the relevance of it today regarding the spiritual growth of black Black Christians is virtually irrelevant. And see, this comment grieves my soul. And the reason why this comment grieves my soul is because this person doesn't see the theological link between historical remembrance and present day commitment to Christ and zeal for Christ and passion for Christ. There's a reason why Yahweh wanted the Israelites to remember the Exodus crossing. There is a reason why Yahweh wanted the Israelites to remember the crossing over Jordan. There's a reason why Yahweh wanted the Israelites to engage in these feasts and festivals, like the Festival of Tabernacles. Because that historical remembrance was supposed to fuel them on towards spiritual fidelity. They were to remember their past and thereby remember the God who made a way out of no way. So when you don't see the connection between Black church history and the spiritual growth of Black Christians, what you're saying is that you don't understand how understanding history can motivate our zeal, passion, and commitment to the God of history. And so I hope that you would reconsider. All right, let's see more. Let's see. Let's see. My brother Phil Fox, salute to you, man. Salute to you, my brother. Salute to you. Love you, man. All right. Hold on one second. Let me see. There was another one. Here's same guy asked this question. I'm curious, do you think MLK was a good Black preacher or even saved? He was a phenomenal preacher. There's no doubt about Dr. King's homiletical prowess. He was a phenomenal preacher. Even saved? I don't know if you're even saved. Okay. A lot of people, thought, Stephen Lawson, supposedly the Bible expositor of the century. Is that guy saved? I don't know about MLK's soul. What I do know is that it is unfair to take MLK's writings during seminary and charge him with those beliefs throughout the entirety of his life. What I do think is unfair is believing an FBI about King when y'all same Trump supporters don't believe that same FBI about Trump. Oh, y'all gonna take the FBI's word for it when it comes to King and believe everything that they're reporting is absolutely true about King. But we need to be suspect of what the FBI is saying when it comes to Trump. I don't know about the man's soul. All right, let's see. All right, over 70% of the Black church today is not reflective of the historical Black church. Too many Black preachers co-sign politics. I dispute that 70% stat. I dispute anything that comes out of Lifeway, sir. I dispute anything that the Southern Baptists have to say about the Black church. If that's where you're taking that stat, I dispute that stat vehemently. I would turn your attention to the stats from the Barna research, and I understand that a lot of those guys on that side, they're trying to discredit the Barna research. And I think that there's a reason why they want to discredit the Barna research, because they're the same people that want to discredit the Black church, period. But listen to me. let's take the 7 historic denominations, because what I think a lot of people do in this conversation is they conflate a lot of the non-denominational, interdenominational black churches out there. As a matter of fact, where's my book? Where's my book? Okay, I don't know where my book is, but I actually crunched the numbers. I think this is an important conversation to have. I don't see my book here. But let me just say this. Let me just say this. Let's say that there are roughly 80 to 100,000 black churches in this country. Okay. We're including in that number the churches that are firmly a part of the 7 historic black denominations. National Baptist Convention of America, National Baptist USA, Progressive National Baptist, African Methodist Episcopal, Christian Methodist Episcopal, African Methodist Episcopal Zion, Church of God in Christ, and I think that's 7. If I'm forgetting one, please let me know. I can tell you, the National Baptist Convention USA ain't caught up in prosperity gospel. That's a lie. The overwhelming majority of black Baptist preachers, and I'm not talking about Baptists in name only. Most of the people that are Baptists in name only, they're not a part of the NBC USA. New Birth is not a part of the NBC USA. But if you look at the NBC USA, nah. Now, I'm not saying that all of those guys are like theologically sound, but they're not prosperity gospel guys. National Baptist Convention of America, definitely not. The National Baptist Convention of America is even more conservative than the National Baptist Convention USA. No, prosperity gospel ain't got a grip on the National Baptist Convention of America. Let's talk about the Progressive National Baptist Convention. The Progressive National Baptist Convention began in 1961. And it's not the Progressive National Baptist Convention because they were trying to be progressive theologically. Gardner C. Taylor, all of those guys, they were theologically orthodox to the core. They called themselves progressive because they disagreed with J.H. Jackson, who was the president of the National Baptist Convention USA at the time, on the tactics behind the civil rights movement. J.H. Jackson was far too conservative. Hence, let's split from the National Baptist Convention USA and create another convention called the Progressive National Baptist Convention USA. So it begins in 1961. And actually, y'all, their first president, my uncle, Tim Chambers Sr., right? Now he's like my great, so so y'all get it. But they're not beholden to the prosperity gospel. I would say more so within the Progressive National Baptist Convention, you have more so a problem with theological liberalism, but not the prosperity gospel. Now let's go to the AME denominations. Yes, you have in the AME denominations, more than in the Baptist denominations, a problem with the prosperity gospel. But those denominations, by and large, no. Yes, I would say it's a greater problem within the AME denomination than the Baptist denominations. But by and large, no. Where it's the biggest problem, and I'm gonna just say this, where the prosperity gospel is the biggest problem is in the Church of God in Christ. That's one of the historic denominations. It's the biggest problem also in a lot of non-denominational and interdenominational black churches. But not all of them. So no, the black church isn't 70% prosperity gospel. That's a lie from people that don't know anything about it, people that aren't involved with it, or a lie that's being perpetuated by people that just hate the black church and want to disparage it. All right. Okay. All right. Here's something. No one engages in or listens to bad doctrine because they don't know their history. The Bible tells us is a result of their heart. Okay. What are you talking about? No one engages or listens to bad doctrine because they don't know their history. What do you mean? Okay. Say that somebody is told by a preacher, and this is where like the disconnect exists, and why a lot of us just think, Chris, I don't know you, but this is where we get frustrated with guys like you. So I don't know you, but this is where we get frustrated, because you wouldn't say that if somebody came to you. No one engages or listens to bad doctrine because they don't know their history. Okay. If somebody came up to you and said, I'm no longer a Christian. You say, why? Well, because 3 years ago, I was told by my pastor that I was going to be healed of cancer. I was going to, because I have faith and because I speak faith, I'm going to be healed of cancer. And time passed and I was never healed of cancer. And I still have cancer to this day. And I've been battling cancer for 3 years. What would you say to that person? What you were told 3 years ago was wrong. What is 3 years ago? History. History that they listened to, bad doctrine that they listened to. Now, even go beyond that. If they knew history, right, then they would understand where the church landed on issues like Gnosticism, which a lot of the prosperity gospel, right, dives in the pool of Gnosticism. So even a study of historical theology would have made them more aware of some of the claims of prosperity, of prosperity preaching. So when you say no one engages or listens to bad doctrine because they don't know their history, listen, a lot of people embrace Arianism and become Jehovah's Witnesses because they don't know their history and they don't know that the church already adjudicated that matter. A lot of people become Hebrew Israelites and embrace the foolishness within Hebrew Israelism because they don't know the historical heresies that they're espousing and where the church landed. So come on, bro. Come on, man. Come on, man. All right. All right. Yeah. All right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Conservative seminaries will not admit because we were black. That's right. That's right. All right. That's right. All right. King never. Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. So what do you mean they split because of King? About to lose. They split because of King. Stop it. Jackson was pure Baptist. They disagreed with King's approach. J.H. Jackson primarily disagreed with King's approach to the civil rights movement. Jackson had a more Washingtonian approach. He disagreed. First of all, he disagreed with King's affinity of Gandhi and Gandhi's civil disobedient campaign in India. But then he also disagreed. He disagreed with the byproduct of that belief, which was sit-ins and marches and things. He disagreed with that. So what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, as a matter of fact, right? Look, have you read this? Have you read this book? Like, what are you talking about, bro? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Anyway. All right. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. So listen, I don't see any other questions popping. I see my brother, the Reverend Kwame Crosby of the Sermon on the Mount. That's my big brother, y'all. Love him so much. But do I see any other questions? And X, you live in LA, Doc. We need to link up and talk about this personally, one-on-one. But I don't see any other questions. So you know what I'm about to do? I'm about to sign off. But before I do, please like, share, and subscribe. Okay, I'll be back on going live again at 4 p.m. Yes, I'm doing 2 lives today. I want this to be the last time that I address any of those guys Vince Ellison, April, any of those guys. I don't want to, this is not what I want my channel to become. Okay. At 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, I'm gonna be talking to my friend and my brother, Will Morton. He has a really amazing story. He left the black church at one point. And we're gonna learn why he left the black church. And now he's back in the black church. We're going to learn why he made his way back to the black church. He's going to talk about his journey. And I think this is going to be instructive for those that care about the black church, care about why people are leaving the black church, care about how we can re-engage those people so they can return back to the black church. That's going to be at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I don't see any other questions. I don't see any other comments. Y'all, thank you for joining me. This is my first time going live on YouTube. Thank you guys for joining me. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, y'all know Facebook is where the majority of my following is. That's where I get the most of my views from. I'm having to rebuild my Instagram because my last Instagram was hacked. I had to start a brand new Instagram, so that's starting from scratch. My YouTube is, we're at a little over 300 subscribers. And so I'm trying to get that going, get that off the ground. But Facebook is primarily where I get most of my views. But please join the Black Church Empowered family. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. 4 p.m. We're going live again. Hope that you'll be on with us. Bye-bye.